doesn't come from a pig, and they can make foie gras without all the ethical problems of force feeding. That this is the perfect meat because they can engineer it down to every last cell. But again, we don't know what the unintended consequences of any of this stuff is, and we only find out through experience, which is the frightening thing.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I wonder if we could do that with fish. I mean, if they
they're growing fish
at
the moment.
Fake fish?
Real fish from fish cells. There's a company called Finless Foods that is the pioneer in all of that, and they're growing fish at the moment.
The same way they're growing beef, like this.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you tried that?
No, because the people I interviewed there, they weren't they were much less full of hype, and they're like, no, it's not ready. What we've got yet isn't ready. But the thing about fish is it's harder because with meat you can make burgers and sausages where it doesn't really, or nuggets where you don't really need cuts of meat. Whereas with fish you really do need cuts of meat, and especially because we're so used to eating sashimi, we know what raw fish is supposed to taste like. So you can't use the smoke and mirrors of cooking it in this butter and adding these herbs or whatever. So fish is kind of harder in some ways, but the need for it is even greater, I would say, than for meat.
Well, it would be nice if they could figure out how to repopulate the ocean. That would be wonderful, because if you talk to people, particularly if you watch any documentaries on tuna and tuna fishermen in Japan, and the way it used to be just 50 years ago and what it is now, it's a radical decrease in the population of the tuna. It's really frightening because we've done it in such a short period of time and so efficiently, and there's no one hitting the brakes. I mean, they're just...
and the only parts of the ocean which are still healthy are in like either so far away that it wouldn't make any financial sense to go fishing there, or they're in politically contested waters, like where you'd start a war if you went there.
Yeah.
We've pretty much taken all the fish out of the ocean that we can do, and also like the people who rely on the ocean, the people who live on the coast, are really suffering, and quite often they're the poorest people. So it's a total disaster what we've done to the ocean. So yeah,
it's another human problem. We're weird. We're
bad. It's not so much that we're weird and bad. What is bad about human beings, I would say, is our greediness. And we don't have to be greedy, and we live in a system that is encouraging us to be greedy all the time, and assumes that we are greedy and that we just want more and more and more, because that's what's required for the system to carry on working. Whereas in fact we don't have to be greedy. We can say this is enough.
Yes, people like you, again, introspective, intelligent people who are rare.
Well, it's not just that. I interviewed this guy. There is one guy I could find. So normally there are people who campaign against all of these technologies. And I was sure I was going to find some crazy animal rights group or some vegan group that would, because animal rights activists, they can get nasty. And certainly in the UK, they've done some very extreme things to fight against, animal cruelty as they see it. And there's no organised opposition to growing meat in labs, even though there are some animal rights reasons to be worried about it. At the moment, a lot of meat that's grown in labs is grown in this stuff called fetal bovine serum, which comes from the calves of the hearts of calves that are fetuses. When their pregnant mothers are being slaughtered in the abattoir, they put a needle into the heart of the calf and pull this stuff out, and this serum is the medium in which the cells are grown. And they're working on finding other ways of growing the cells, but at the moment, that's the best stuff to use. So you'd expect there to be some animal rights argument, some fight against these people, but there isn't, because it's seen as the silver bullet that's going to stop people from eating meat. But I found one person, this British sociologist, a vegan sociologist, who says that, actually the answer in all of this is that we have to stop thinking of meat as being, the answer isn't to have a sort of techno fix that solves the problem. We just have to stop feeding meat to our kids so much, and then they won't have such an appetite for it. The appetite is learned. There are people who've been vegan for a long time who, when they try and eat meat again, they can't digest it, or they think it's disgusting, or they hate the texture of it.
Those people are pretty rare.
You think?
Yeah.
You think people rush back to it with open arms?
I think they do. I think they smell
vegetarian
fat steak cooking. Oh, it smells amazing.
I mean, my sister's been vegetarian for like 30 years, and if she eats meat by mistake, it's revolting to her. In her mouth, it just feels
Don't you think that's odd?
Well, as someone who loves meat, I can't empathise with it, but I can understand if you haven't had it for a while, it's like eating a piece of muscle.
Yeah, delicious muscle.
But anyway, he said the answer do with the world that your children grow up in.
Mm.
And we need to just, and I kind of buy that. I mean, I think about my son. My son is 6. We had some upstairs neighbours who are in their 70s. They're a gay couple. They got married. It was just completely normal for him, and it's normal for me as well. But it's still a little bit, because it's not the world that I was born into, where that happens all the time. I'm still like, oh wow, congratulations. Whereas for my son, it's like, yeah, men marry women, men marry men, women marry. He's native into that world, and I think that's how you get social change, is by making the next generation native into a world where people think differently. And I think the way that we're going to save the world, I think vegans will save the world not by doing the plant-based meat or by growing meat in labs, but by getting people not to feed their kids meat. That's the answer.
I don't know.
And then they'll think it's disgusting.
I don't
Do you
think
think
it's
someone
healthy
who's
for
not
children
eaten
to
meat
not eat
all their
meat.
life? But you can get the nutrition you need elsewhere. You can.
It's not bioavailable the same way it is with meat. Meat is the most efficient way to get protein, most efficient way to get amino acids.
It is.
The best way to get B12, and B12 deficiency is one of the biggest problems with vegans.
I can't believe I'm here on your podcast making the vegan argument here as somebody who is not even a vegetarian.
It's possible with some people to do it well, but there's also biodiversity in human beings. People are very different in what they can and can't consume. Obviously, some people can't eat certain nuts or they'll die, and other people have no problem with it whatsoever. We all come from different parts of the world, and that's another problem with whether it's even with meat eating. Some people, their body just does not agree with eating meat, or other people. I mean, there's some science to, and it's really disputed, to what blood type you are, and I happen to be O positive, which is supposed to be really good for meat. I eat a lot of meat and I'm very healthy. I've never had a problem with it. But I know some people that don't like meat. It doesn't sit well with them. But I know some people that have a real problem with grains. And I know some people that have a real problem with certain green leafy vegetables make them sick. It sounds crazy, but it's just.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, people are we are diverse, and also it is a very efficient way of getting nutrition. But you also have to disentangle how much of our desire for meat is cultural rather than biologically necessary.
When my daughter was 1 year old, she was a baby. My wife was holding her, and I was cooking ribs, and she's literally pulling away from her mother, trying to get a hold of my ribs because they tasted so good. She could smell it, and then she's got this. We have a video of this, of her with this little rib bone, and she's like, with the little tiny mouth.
Yeah, but presumably that wasn't the first time she ate meat.
That was the first time she ate meat. It was the first time she ate meat. Yes. Yeah. She wasn't. I don't even think she was 1. She was tiny. Like, she wasn't even walking yet. It was genetic. There was something in her little brain and her senses from smelling it. She wanted that meat. Maybe it's because it's my kid. I don't know. Maybe it's learned.
I think, maybe there is something primal about it, but that doesn't, but there's also a lot of primal stuff about us that we don't act on. I love eating meat. I just feel like we need to not have so much of it. I mean, it used to be like a big treat. In England, we have, in Britain, we have the Sunday roast, which is this tradition of, you have one kind of big feast on a Sunday, a sort of giant family to get together, and it was an occasion. And I think maybe we need to have that more of a culture of that, really. But the answer is not telling people they should not eat any meat at all, I think, also, because I think that's...
Have you ever talked to people that are proponents of the carnivore diet?
I have never spoken to any.
You should. Yes, I have. It's fascinating. Here's what's fascinating. It's all anecdotal, of course, but there's a lot of people with autoimmune disorders that have completely cured those autoimmune disorders by eating only meat. They literally only eat meat, and they eat nose to tail, meaning they eat organs. They eat a lot of organ meat. They get most of their vitamins from liver and heart and kidneys, and they eat fatty cuts of meat, and they're basically semi-ketogenic, because if you eat a certain amount of protein, your body develops this. There's a process called, I think it's called glucogenesis, where your body converts protein into glucose. So it actually keeps you from being ketogenic, but it's because you're eating so much protein.
It makes you smell really bad, doesn't it? This kind of stuff makes you smell bad.
You see, that's a vegan talking to you right now. Someone's trying to tell you, if you eat the meat, you're going to smell bad. Your breath will be bad. You know what smells bad? Broccoli farts. It People eat too much broccoli. That's bad too.
Is
I
this
don't
the
know.
Jordan Peterson diet? Is this the diet that Jordan Peterson has been
Jordan
talking about?
Peterson is on that diet, but I would say you
He's
would
not a
want
good
to,
poster boy for it.
not the best, because Jordan has had a lot of problems. It was good for his
Yeah.
autoimmune disorders, but he's had a few problems with, publicly recently with benzodiazepine and all those getting off these antidepressant drugs and anti-anxiety drugs. There's some other doctors though that are proponents of this, particularly, and they actually are prescribing it for people with autoimmune or disorders, particularly people with arthritis and arthritis issues, because a lot of people find that there's, particularly with grains, there's a lot of inflammation issues that certain folks have with grains and glutens and all sorts of different things that are really basically fairly new in terms of human evolution of our consumption, like breads and things along those lines.
Yes, but then again, that goes back to this idea of our insides being that we're internally cavemen, and that we're designed to eat a certain way and be a certain way, when we don't have to be that way, because we have access to a wide variety of different kinds of,
right, but the thing is, they're talking about health consequences with this wide variety. And when they have an elimination diet, and one of the best elimination diets is this carnivore diet, because you're really cutting out everything.
On the carnivore diet, are people not getting cancers?
Well, it's not. Here's the thing: it's not that study, and there's not that many people doing it. And there have been people that have done it for decades, but again, all this is anecdotal. You would have to study people. And I know that Harvard is actually in the middle of some long-term carnivore study that they're doing. They're trying to find out whether or not there's any real science to any of this stuff, because there are these people that have these autoimmune disorders that are clearing up. I did it for a month. It was pretty fascinating. It was really interesting.
Why did you stop?
Well, because I love food. I just love food. I love pasta, and I love bread, and I love vegetables. I love all kinds of food. And it's very limiting to only eat meat, but I did it for a whole month. I ate nothing but meat for 1 month. I ate mostly steak and liver and wild game and a lot of animal fat. I felt great. It's kind of crazy how good I felt. Yeah, I lost 12 pounds. And I had energy all day long. That was what was weird about it, was there was no lulls. Like, my energy stayed at a constant state all day long. Very strange. You should try it, just for a goof.
Wow, maybe that's my next book, is investigating the carnivores and seeing if they're all right.
The weird thing is the complete elimination of brain fog. I found that fascinating. I mean, I did a video afterwards where I showed how much weight that I had lost, because I'd gotten kind of fat. I had been eating too much. I'm a glutton, and if given enough time, like, I will eat. I eat so much. I eat massive amounts of food. I don't know what it is. I just have always been a glutton, and I work out a lot, so I stay pretty lean. But sometimes I can go off the rails, where I'm not even hungry. I just keep eating. It's really kind of a crazy thing. But on the carnivore diet, I did lose a lot of weight. But it's very limiting in terms of, like, I enjoy food. I like restaurants. I enjoy a chef's creation. I think it's fascinating when they combine all the different flavors, and I love the art of it. I love the art of cooking. I think it's an amazing art form that you enjoy with your face. I mean, it's incredible. I love food. So to me, it was like, I'm not going to do this forever. I just can't. I enjoy too many different things in terms of flavors, and I also respect the culinary art form of cooking. I think it's to me, it's a different kind of art. It's like music or literature or all the other different ways people express themselves, but they express themselves through food, and I respect that.
Exactly it, though, which is that food is not just nutrition; it's culture.
Yeah.
There is the culture of how we eat, and the ceremony of eating together and appreciating the food, and the way that food is displayed. And actually, probably the culture is more important than
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely more important than nutrition. Otherwise, we'd all just be taking pills and not eating. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you wouldn't get the nutrition from pills, though. That wouldn't work.
No, if you could, people wouldn't, and not just because they want the taste in their mouths, but they like the way that it breaks up your day. That you sit down, you have a meal, it represents a certain occasion. You know, it's a huge part of what it is to be human is to eat and how our meals are assembled and how all of that. Yeah, and that's the point. When things are cultural, they're not. We can change because we can change our culture. Whether or not we want to is up to us. But
Well,
it is
yeah, that's
cultural.
also one of the more interesting things about food is going to a place and experiencing this new culture
Yeah,
and their new
freedom.
food. Yeah, like going to Thailand and eating authentic Thai food, or going to Italy and eating authentic Italian food. That is, to me, it's like one of the great ways of experiencing a place. I mean, the late great Anthony Bourdain, who was a friend of mine, is the reason why I changed my opinion of food. I used to just think it tasted good, but then I watched his program and I realized, oh, this is an art form. I had a blind side. I had a blind spot. I didn't look at it as an art form. But his passion for cuisine, for chefs, and for the way that they prepared and sourced the food from these fresh markets and got everything, pieced it together, and then presented it. I was like, oh, I was looking at this wrong. This is art. I didn't think of it that way. Now I think of it that way. That's why I can't be carnivore. I just like food too much. It's too important. I like wine. I like all of it. I like all of it together. It's like.
But also, ultimately, a lot of this comes down to what is life for? What is your life for? I mean, there are these people who are life extensionists who do whatever they can to prolong their life, but you would argue that the way they're living, it's not a life worth extending.
Boring.
You have to make choices in your life about what do you want from life. Are you going to do something that's a little bit unhealthy because we all make choices. For me, it's really difficult though. I mean, in terms of having written the book, I've had like people interview me about it who are vegan who have asked me, how come you're not vegan now? How come having written all of this? And it's really, really difficult because I tried to explain, well, I'm eating less meat and there isn't a moral argument you can make other than I really, really enjoy it, which makes you sound really superficial. But I enjoy it, and I have a family that enjoys it, and it would involve a huge disruption in our lives. But
yeah, it's a weird one, right? I think the real argument is health. I really do. I was vegetarian for 6 months back when I was fighting. I did it to try to make weight, and my performance suffered. And you could argue that I wasn't doing it correctly, and I'm sure I wasn't. But boy, when I started eating meat again, I felt so much better. Like instantaneously, I felt better, and then it corresponded with.
To do it well, you just to live really well on a vegan diet, you have to be very organized,
yes.
and you have to
plan.
And I don't think everybody could do that.
Well, I think you have to be. First of all, it has to suit your body. You have to be organized. You have to be diligent, and you have to be educated. You have to really understand supplementation and do it correctly. One last thing I want to talk to you about is death.
Yeah.
Another thing you covered. Please expand on your thoughts about death.
So I was looking at the perfect death, and that we have this kind of dream that you could maybe take a tablet and fall asleep painlessly and peacefully at a time of your choosing. But actually, that doesn't really exist, or rather, it does exist. There is one substance that you can take that will give you that death. And it's a particular substance. It's what they used to give prisoners on death row. It's what they give animals when they put them to sleep. But it's illegal to possess privately almost everywhere in the world. And so at the moment, if you want to be in control of your own death, you either have to put yourself at risk of a death that isn't very nice by doing some risky things that might not work out for you, and might be horrible for people who find you, or you have to get a doctor to help you die in a place where assisted dying is legal. And so I was writing this from the perspective of being in the UK, where it's not legal at all. And I was looking at, there are some doctors that will, for a fee, teach you how to kill yourself in the best possible way, like either how to get hold of these illegal drugs or other ways of killing yourself that are supposedly peaceful and painless. And
what is the drug? What is the thing that they used to give
it's
people?
It's called Nembutal. It's a barbiturate.
Mm.
So the company who used to make it is a Danish company called Lundbeck, and they stopped providing it to death row facilities, I think, in 2011, because it became very controversial that they were doing it. But it's the same barbiturate. It's what Marilyn Monroe took when she killed herself. But I wouldn't recommend anyone try and get it, because at the moment, if you try and get it, you have to do lots of stuff on the dark web, and you might be sent the wrong stuff. And nobody wants to be taking the wrong stuff when you've decided you're going to die. So basically, the investigation that I was doing was looking at, whilst we haven't worked out how to give everyone the right to die, there are people who are stepping into that void and telling people, I can give you control over your own death, I can give you the perfect death. And I looked at different people who've invented death machines that can supposedly do this. But there is a guy at the moment called Philip Nitschke who has developed this 3D printable capsule, which looks like a kind of James Bond vehicle, or a kind of, I don't know, a spaceship. You get the plans, so you have to be a member of his organization. You get the plans, and then you go and you print out this capsule. You pour liquid nitrogen into the base of it, and then you lie inside and you die in about 2 minutes.
Oof.
Yeah, so I saw this being displayed. I went to Venice to this design show in Venice where it was being unveiled, and it was a sort of strangely beautiful thing, but it's a kind of symbol for me of how ridiculous this is. If we're talking about overshoot engineering again, all we need to do is give people the right to die. We don't need to be able to give people the means to 3D print their own death. Because ultimately, I think it's probably a good idea if other people are involved and doctors are involved, because who's to say that you wouldn't decide to do this if you were drunk or bereaved or might one day decide that you wanted to live. And until we've kind of worked out how to frame laws in ways such that vulnerable people aren't exploited or vulnerable people aren't killed using these right to die laws, there are going to be people who step into the void and give people who maybe shouldn't necessarily have it a way of killing themselves.
It's another very human problem in that it's very messy. Like if you have someone who has terminal cancer and they're constantly in pain and they're going to die, why do we have this archaic idea that they have to ride this out to the end?
Like, totally. Although there's anything the language a bit about their fight against cancer or them losing their battle. I mean, I really think you talk about, if aliens were looking at us, I look at it in terms of people 200 years from now, when they are studying this era in history, what will they look back on and think, God, they were barbaric at that time? And I think the two things definitely are drugs and the right to die, and the fact that we let people suffer. But the people who want this death machine or who are trying to buy Nembutal that I looked at, they aren't terminally ill. They're people who are kind of baby boomers who are used to having control in their lives and being in charge of their own destiny, who are terrified of things like getting dementia or motor neuron disease, and terrified of losing their dignity. And so they want to be able to own something in their home or have the plans for something that will mean that they'll still be able to be in control at the end. But death is the point is it's a symptom of the fear that we have of death rather than an actual solution to that problem.
I think we also have the fear of people making an error, and people who they're experiencing great grief, or they're experiencing the depression that comes from the loss of a job or a broken relationship or whatever it is, and they would make a hasty decision that they would regret later. Well, obviously they can't regret it, but other people in their life are certainly going to regret it. But if they just hung in there, hung in there and wrote it out and sought counseling and sought the advice and the love of friends and family, they could get through this and be stronger on the other side and find a new relationship, find a new job, whatever it is. And you don't have to pull the cord. But the thing is, like, who are we to tell people when they can and can't? That's where it gets really strange.
So that's what this doctor says. This doctor is a libertarian, and he says it's ridiculously paternalistic that doctors should be able to say, I know your mind better than you do, I know you better. And he says that you could develop an AI that could tell whether or not somebody was of sound mind. He personally thinks if you're depressed, you should still be given the advice on how to take your own life. It's still your choice. It's a choice that you can make rationally if you're depressed. If you're mentally ill, that's a different matter. But he's saying this is all about taking back control, the individual. It's your life, you should be in charge of it. But the problem is there are so many stories. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that documentary The Bridge about people who jump
Yes,
off
I
the
did.
Golden Gate,
Yeah.
and there's that person there who survived, who talks about that visceral feeling of being in the air and thinking, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
And the point is, you kind of do need human gatekeepers to take you through the decision that you're making. And I think the idea that I just think most of the doctors who are in places where the right to die is legal, who are involved in making those decisions, are not people who are reveling in their power, but they are people who are genuinely trying to find out if this is what you really want. And I think you kind of do need those gatekeepers because it is always a life or death decision. It has to be the right decision every time.
It's a strange thing that we impose our own ideas on whether or not a person can or cannot end their life. Like we say, no, you have to keep going. Like the law says you must keep going. It's very odd because I want them to get better. Like I want people who are feeling depression and want to end their life. I don't want them to do it. I don't want them to. But I also don't think that I should be the person who can tell them whether or not they can or can't.
But in some countries where the right to die is legal, so for example in the Netherlands, in Holland, and in Belgium, you can be given the right to die. You can be helped to die if you're depressed, or if you're a chronic alcoholic who says, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to beat this. It's making me miserable. And I think a really large proportion of the number of people who are euthanized in those countries have something like depression. So that's not to say that you wouldn't allow people who are depressed to take their own lives. It just means you have to come to a conclusion that there's no reason to think they're ever going to feel better. That's the point. And if there's ever a case to objectively think that someone might be able to feel better with medication or counselling or a change of circumstances, then there has to be hope for people.
Well, the alcoholic one is a weird one because have they exhausted all possible alternatives? In that case, like have they explored psychedelic therapy, which is illegal but massively effective for people that are addicts, particularly ibogaine. Ibogaine is incredibly effective for people that have addictions to opioids, alcohol, even cigarettes, even lifestyle problems, and yet it's completely illegal in this country.
But there's lots of entrepreneurs working on it, aren't there? On finding a way of getting it to market.
Well, they're doing clinics in Mexico. Yeah. I have a friend who owns a clinic in Mexico, and he started this clinic after he went down to Mexico he had lower back pain from an injury that was severe and got hooked on opioids and went to Mexico, went through an ibogaine clinic and got therapy, and then completely snapped. He was completely cured of it and realized, like, okay, there is an actual, real, workable alternative to all these different methods of getting off of it, and it's for some reason not available on this patch of dirt. I have to drive across a border, this weird fucking wall, and go to this place, and that's where I can do it, but it works. So he just started up a clinic in Mexico and started bringing people that he knew had problems with it, and it's not just opioids, but alcohol, all sorts of behavior problems. It's a very ruthlessly introspective experience. Apparently, I haven't currently personally done it, but I know many people who have, and they said it's been amazingly beneficial. I know several people that have kicked pills that way.
It is incredible, really, that we have good drugs and bad drugs. This is what I mean, like in 200 years' time. The idea that still in the UK, pretty much everything is banned, and even there are epileptic kids who've had to fight to say that they need cannabis-based medication. It stops their seizures. They've had to really, really fight for this in the UK, but it's because of the way politics works. But it's ridiculously short-sighted, and the sort of thing that we're going to be really embarrassed about one day. I think that it was ever like this, but yeah. There's amazing stuff going on. There's amazing, boundaries being crossed if we would just allow ourselves to embrace them. And I'm a pretty hopeful person. That's the thing, and I really believe that human beings are capable of wonderful things.
Clearly.
And that's why I feel like the idea of entrepreneurs taking advantage of our anxieties and saying that they can make money by providing us with quick solutions that stop us from looking at why we're afraid or why we're greedy or why we don't want to compromise in relationships. I think it's a real shame.
I agree with you. Jenny, I really enjoyed talking to you. I really did. And I really hope you do a podcast. I think you'd be amazing at it.
I've got to now, don't I? If you say I've got to do a podcast, then I've got to do a podcast. Maybe I will.
But until then, your book, Sex Robots and Vegan Meat, is available now everywhere. Is there an audiobook, and do you read it?
There is an audiobook, and I read it. Yes,
excellent.
I love doing it. So yeah, get the audiobook, get the ebook, get the book. It's a good book.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, friends, for tuning into the show, and thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Casper. Go to Casper.com and use the code Rogan for $100 off your mattress order. That's use the code Rogan for $100 off your mattress order. Terms and conditions apply. See Casper.com/terms. Thank you also to SimpliSafe. Awesome home security. U.S. News and World Report named it the best overall home security of 2020. Head to simplysafe.com/Rogan and get a free HD camera for listeners of this podcast. That's simplysafe.com/Rogan. Go there and make sure that they know that we sent you. Thank you also to Squarespace, the host of my website, joerogan.com, and the place where you are going to go to make your next website. You can do it by yourself. You don't need help. They've got it dialed in. Their simple, easy-to-use drag-and-drop user interface and beautiful designer templates. They're perfectly made. And you can try it for free. Ooh, that's what you want to hear. Go to squarespace.com/Joe for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, use the offer code Joe to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain from Squarespace. And thank you also to the motherfucking Cash App. Download the Cash App from the App Store or the Google Play Store today, and when you do download it, make sure you use the promo code Joe Rogan, all one word. You will receive $10, and the Cash App will also send $10 to our good friend Justin Wren's Fight for the Forgotten charity, building wells for the pygmies in the Congo. Thank you, friends. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the show. Bye-bye.
Amount of sandstone that made the Great Pyramid was shipped out of Ohio to make various buildings all over the world.
Really?
Most of them in the United States, obviously, but all over the place.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, just weird facts I found on there.
Of the humans.
We don't know history.
We know some, right?
The only history that we know is the one we go discover on.
4 witnesses and an answer. On the 29th of December, the two US presidential candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, will take part in the first of 3 90-minute live televised debates ahead of the presidential election in November.
It's no different than the gladiators, you know.
President's ability to engage with the public. On this week's inquiry, we're asking, will the presidential debates in America change the course of the election?
Part 1. Suntanned and handsome.
It took the candidates into a new place. Suddenly it mattered what they looked like.
Our first expert witness explains how the very first televised presidential debate in America marked a key point in the country's political history. Elaine Camargue is Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. She's also author of Primary Politics, Everything You Need to Know About How America Nominates Its Presidential Candidates. She takes us back to that first presidential debate in 1960 between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, watched live by 70 million Americans.
On the one hand was the youthful, handsome, suntanned, rested Senator Kennedy, and on the other hand, you had Vice President Richard Nixon, who had been sick, who had lost a lot of weight, who refused to wear makeup, who didn't realize that you had to shave late in the afternoon if you had a dark beard before you go on TV, and who perspired throughout the debate and had to mop the sweat from his face.
The day after the debate, Kennedy, who had been lagging in the polls, tipped into becoming the slight favourite. Within weeks, he defeated Nixon in the election by one of the narrowest margins in history. But as more debates took place over the years to come, it became clear there was a lot more to managing perceptions than just looking good.
By the time you get to the debates, there's a narrative, right? There's a narrative about each candidate. And one of the things you don't want to do in the debates is have one of those moments where you reinforce the narrative.
In 1980, Ronald Reagan attempted to diffuse his image as a dangerous warmonger in his debate with President Jimmy Carter, often repeating the line, "There you go again."
Governor Reagan again, typically, is against such a proposal.
Governor, there you go again.
That debate really catapulted him into the landslide that he won over Jimmy Carter, just simply by being an avuncular and kind and non-threatening person on TV. It clinched his victory.
In the run-up to that election, there was only one debate. But 4 years later, when Reagan, then president, went up against rival Walter Mondale, 17 years his junior, in the first of 3 debates, he stumbled.
He had a very embarrassing several minutes where he seems to get lost in his own mind, wandering down the California highway, and no one quite knows what he's talking about, and maybe he didn't even know what he's talking about.
First debates are arguably the most important because they command the largest audiences. During the second debate, 73-year-old Reagan managed to pull things around when a moderator asked him whether his age should be a consideration.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit
for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
And, everybody cracked up laughing, frankly, including Mondale, who couldn't help it. He cracked up laughing, too.
Ronald Reagan went on to win a landslide against Walter Mondale. The exchange served to show that debates are often less about policy and more about connecting with voters. It was also a lesson that crushing the opposition is often less important than winning over the audience with empathy and the right body language.
They have to be able to look at the camera and look at Americans. They can't get too distracted by their opponent. That's a problem.
In 1992, it was not his opponent distracting President Bush Sr. when he debated against Bill Clinton, but an urge to check the time, just as a woman from the audience was asking about how the recession had affected the candidates.
After Bush stumbled around and looked at his watch, Clinton walked right up to the woman and talked to her really directly and empathetically. And I think that was a very important moment in that debate and in that election.
Polling the day after the debate revealed that 58% of Americans thought that Clinton had won. There's also a lot of emphasis on rehearsing and crafting some neat ripostes.
A lot of times these cute lines in the hands of sort of an inexperienced or just somebody who's not very good at this, sometimes these cute lines look exactly like that. They look like a cute line that somebody fed to you. Hillary Clinton had that problem. She really couldn't deliver these zingers very authentically.
In 2016, Hillary Clinton found her opponent Donald Trump's unorthodox style and lack of observance of protocol a real challenge.
That's the hardest thing about debating Trump, is that you're not in the normal debate situation. You're not arguing over what the best way to achieve economic growth is. You're arguing whether or not there's growth at all.
What then might the lessons of the past mean for how Trump and Biden will face off when the debates start on the 29th of September?
Part 2. King the Rules.
I think that the president is going to be in his element at these debates.
Our second expert witness was communications strategist for Donald Trump during the last election and is close to the current Republican campaign. Brian Lanza says Trump will try to do what any incumbent does, which is present his first term as a substantial achievement.
I think he's going to strike the tone of a successful president. He's going to have the stature, of an incumbent president who's achieved things here domestically and internationally as well.
4 years ago, viewers witnessed a presidential debate between rivals Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the dynamics of which were quite unlike anything they had seen in any presidential debate before. Debates are conducted within the framework of a multiple of rules governing, amongst other things, who can speak when.
You called it the gold standard. You called it the gold standard of trade deals. You said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No, but when it was negotiated...
So is it President Obama's fault?
In the debate with Hillary Clinton, he interrupts her a lot. He breaks the rules. Do you think he'll be trying to stick to the rules this time round?
I watched some of the first debates and I cringed. I think when you look at a President Trump debate, you can't look at it in a normal American filter. CEOs operate under a certain way, and they see the rules as nuisance. So, no, I don't expect President Trump to look at the rules and say, I'm going to stick to it 100%. I think if you look at some of the key moments of the debates against Secretary of State Clinton, Trump had his best moments when it was Hillary's time to speak.
During this campaign, Trump has suggested that his rival Joe Biden is frail and mentally infirm, the implication being that he's unfit for the office of president.
Joe would say the unemployment rate in the great state of Ohio. No, you're in South Carolina. Joe, you're in South. They come up and you ever see the guy that note? No, it's South Carolina. It's not Ohio.
Do you think by setting the bar low for Biden, Trump has not really helped his own cause because it's easy for Biden then to outperform expectations.
I think there's some truth to that. Absolutely. The bar has been set very low for Biden. So I do think the slow Biden or the sick Biden is a narrative that hasn't caught on, and it's actually helped Biden a little bit, in my point of view.
The two candidates will be asked questions by moderators and given a limited time in which to respond. The coronavirus pandemic is almost certain to loom large on the agenda. Brian says Trump will present a positive depiction of his handling of the crisis.
He's actually, A, stopped the United States from falling into a Great Depression, which is what the media told us was going to happen in May, and B, prevented, nearly 2.5 million deaths at a minimum when the media said, we can lose up to 3 million people.
Brian says if the president is drawn, however, on details beyond the broad figures, he may find himself struggling.
I think any time we have a long, protracted discussion about COVID, the testing becomes a weak point. I mean, we're a superpower. We're so far behind in testing that even myself as a supporter, somebody who's always ready to pick up the pitchfork with the president, I'm still confused at why we continue to come up short on testing.
And there are some other things that the president doesn't want to talk about. Brian says if the subject of the failed negotiations with North Korea surface in the debates, Donald Trump could become quite unsettled.
I think that opens him up to, classifying his first term as less than stellar on the foreign policy side. Also, healthcare. If the president had a soft spot on his chin, those would be the soft spots on his chin.
Above all, though, Donald Trump is a very experienced television performer.
Politicians are so scared and they're so puppeted and they're so rehearsed that oftentimes they look like they're outside of their own skin during these debates. I think the president's strength is that he's comfortable in his own skin and he knows who he is, and he's been around the media for a very long time and he understands it. And I think that's what becomes his strength, is like, this is just another day.
It's very different when you're hoping to become the president as against when you are already the president. That changes the dynamic of the debate, does it not?
No, because I think at the end of the day, President Trump is still that outsider trying to change a broken system in Washington, D.C., and Joe Biden is still the consummate insider defending a broken system in Washington, D.C.
You spent time with Donald Trump in the last few weeks. What frame of mind would you say that he's in?
He's a fighter, so he's excited to fight for his record and fight for the American people for the next 7 weeks. He's eager to debate the issues. He's eager to debate his record.
Part 3. Challenger.
I'm Mark Alexander. I am the Dean at Villanova University, Charles Whittier School of Law.
Our third expert witness prepared Barack Obama for the Democratic primary debates when he was running for president in 2008 and was one of his policy directors. He says these debates take place at an important moment in the Biden campaign.
They are one of the few opportunities where the voters will be able to see the two candidates side by side to make that kind of comparison. So while Vice President Biden has had a fairly successful campaign thus far, this is a crucial moment for him to be able to stand next to his opponent, the incumbent, to make the case straight to the American voters.
Biden was a senator for decades and also served 8 years as vice president under Barack Obama. So what strengths do you think he goes in with?
Biden's strengths in the debating context are, first, he knows what he's talking about. He actually has taken a lot of time to dive into public policy issues, so he really will be able to speak with great depth and expertise. So it's not just that he has the resume, but he's also got the experience that has given him knowledge, expertise.
Despite his command of the subject matter, Biden has a rather mixed record on the debate stage.
Sometimes the vice president can ramble, he can talk on, he can sometimes go from one story to the next, indeed, and that's going to be one of his challenges. He is not a slick, super polished candidate. And the question is whether people see that as a way in which he is genuine, or whether they see that in a way in which he is indecisive. And those are two very different directions that, that one might be positive and one would be negative.
He's also got a tendency to stutter.
Indeed, if you are under the bright lights and under the intense scrutiny of Donald Trump and the moderators, that stuttering can be an obstacle. There's no doubt about it.
Do you think he'll have a line to deal with Trump's interruptions?
I expect that Joe Biden will have lines ready to respond to Donald Trump's interruptions if they do come, or to any interruptions that would come to any answers he's giving. I think he'd be prepared to say something to the effect, the American people need to hear this, or you may want to bully me, but I think the American people deserve better. I think he'd have some sorts of responses like that.
And where do you think Trump will try to attack him?
President Trump will try to attack Joe Biden as being part of a failed establishment, as he'll want to call it, something like that. He'll want to attack Vice President Biden as being too liberal. He'll want to attack Vice President Biden as somebody who would be soft on crime and allow social unrest. And he'll want to attack Vice President Biden on the economy.